Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kiara Simmons-Wood, and I'm the Events and Marketing Executive at Charity Digital. I'm going to be your host for today's session and would like to give you all a very warm welcome. So today's session on fundraising revenue is sponsored by the digital fundraising experts iRaiser, who provide fundraising solutions to more than 700 non-profit clients across Europe, raising more than €2 billion for their causes to date. The session will be delivered by Owen Beecher, iRaiser's UK and Ireland country manager, and the session is going to cover how to identify what type of fundraising products you want and how to build them, how to understand your donor behaviour, which digital fundraising products they're engaging with and why, and finally, the ins and outs of paid digital marketing strategies on various platforms, such as Google, YouTube, Facebook, and more. Now, just before handing over to Owen, I just want to share a few house rules and pointers for today's session. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to watch on demand within a week's time. The slides and other resources will also be made available to you by the end of the day, so don't worry if you've missed something. During the webinar, please ask lots of questions in the Q&A section of Zoom for Owen to address at the end of his presentation. And feel free to share any other comments, experiences, or top tips in the chat section. And if there is a particular question in the Q&A section that you'd like answered, you can also upvote questions for them to be answered first. Finally, if you encounter any sound or image issues, please let me know in the chat and I'll do my very best to get the session back to normal as soon as I can. Without further ado, let me hand over to Owen.
Thanks so much, Kiara. That's a lovely intro. And thanks very much for hosting these events. Obviously, this is not the first time we've done one of these, but they're always super well attended and very well put together as well. So hats off to Charity Digital for these. Thanks to everybody who's come to this as well. I guess, like myself, you'll all be aware that there's been quite a lot of in-person conferences recently, so it's much nicer to do this from my living room and not have to brave the 28-degree weather outside, which I am not built for. Obviously, we have quite a meaty topic today. We're talking about what we're going to do to maintain good fundraising revenue when times are tough. It is quite a difficult thing to discuss. It's a challenge for fundraisers of charities of all sizes. But I think it's something that we can view as both challenging and also a positive. So there will be quite a lot of content. As I said, the slides will be made available today and the recording of the presentation within the week. And obviously you can contact me on all of the socials if there is anything specific that I have whizzed through too quickly today and you'd like to discuss in more detail later on. Just to touch base, sorry, there we go. On the agenda today, we're going to tackle this session in a linear fashion. I think one of the most important things to remember when we talk about implementing strategies and doing fundraising well is that a lot of the activities you do are dependent on having good structures, good strategies, and good planning in place beforehand. And I always like to present things in such a way in the order of how organizations should do them. On a very simple level, if you don't have good data recording in place and you try and engage in a new piece of fundraising, you're going to make bad decisions because you're not being led by the right type of data and insight. So in this agenda, we're going to basically tackle a challenge. So we have difficult fundraising conditions at the moment, and we are going to run a project that aims to maintain and potentially increase revenue in what is considered generally to be quite a tough climate. So the agenda for this is going to be, first off, admitting we have a problem, and that's looking at the scale of the issues that we face as fundraisers. Then we're going to look at the structures and strategies of our organizations, of our teams, of our fundraising units to get our own house in order, because before we start looking at new areas, we must make sure that we're working with the right type of foundations. We're then going to look at attribution and analysis. So understanding how people engage with us and understanding how we can do that as an organization best. Then we'll look at marketing and media buying and the key area of fundraising, that is getting your ask in front of people. And finally, we'll look at what do we do next? So how do we develop products in such a way that makes them sustainable, that understands their value, and also, kind of facilitates growth without increasing risk to a degree that's dangerous when challenges are tough. What we're not going to do is look at live examples for inspiration. There is a place for that, but we are looking at a very forward-facing scenario. An email created from 2 years ago is not going to be a valuable exercise for this piece. So we'll very much look at processes that organizations can take back and start working on themselves, and ultimately will be valuable regardless of the size of the organization. So these type of exercises are geared for charities of all sizes, fundraising teams of all sizes. Even if you are an individual who is alone in your organization fundraising, you can apply these type of techniques and these type of processes to your own thinking and your own, the way you manage your own workload. And the goal is that you can benefit from this at every level. Obviously, my focus is very digital. Charity Digital's focus is very digital, so that will be the frame within we view this. I will touch base on some non-digital activities, specifically with regard to boosting efficiencies as we go. But we'll start off by admitting we have a problem. And that's something that is both positive and negative. First and foremost, we have to look at the numbers out there. So I've used CAF's 2022 giving report as a good example to see where revenue is struggling. So in terms of the amount of people that are giving, we are looking at a decline from pre-COVID. Obviously, the COVID era of 2020 and some of 2021 was very much an outrider, both in terms of the type of activity that was going on, but also in terms of the amount of disposable income people had. So the real benchmark we are looking at right now is 2019 for where we should be in terms of fundraising. And it's not looking great. We haven't recovered to the same numbers there, and that's both in terms of revenue in the market itself, and that can be across all areas. So in terms of individual giving events, but also grants, fundraising through corporates and bits and pieces like that. But just the number of people that have self-declared as giving to charity has gone down quite significantly. So that's an 8% decline since pre-COVID. We're looking at declines in peer-to-peer sponsorship as well, which means some of the, I guess, traditional resilience type fundraising, which would be organizing a big event, has started to struggle as well. There's a 6% dip in that area. And ultimately what that means is we need to consider our position in a overall declining market and how we as charities are robust in handling that. There's also worth noting that there has been some major humanitarian crises in the past couple of years that many of the attendees here will have worked directly on. But some of the attendees here will have also noticed potential loss of revenue for those periods when attention's been focused away from their traditional causes and moved into the emergency appeal as well, that's garnering a lot of the media attention. One of the things to consider there is that might also indicate that the general baselines are significantly lower. In both cases, over the past 2 years, the major, I guess, above the line emergencies have happened away from traditional high spike giving time. So kind of February, March type of thing, which is not always traditionally the best time to raise money. So the overall giving suggests that actually the baseline could be quite a bit lower. And that is something that we have to tackle head on. What that means is we have challenges. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can't overcome these challenges, but it means we do, as fundraisers, need to tackle that problem head on and not develop an ostrich complex about it. So what are the challenges? And I want to talk about challenges that are both good and bad. First of all, the elephant in the room is the cost of living crisis. People have less disposable income, things cost more, your mortgage is going up, your gas bill is going up, the price of food in your local supermarket is going up. The first to suffer in all of those cases is voluntary contributions. So charities, being one of the key areas of voluntary contribution, can expect to see people make sacrifices from things like regular giving. So attrition is going to happen. Gifts in peer-to-peer environments and gifts in one-off cash environments are also going to suffer quite significantly there. That is a reality. It is not necessarily something that we must accept as a drop in revenue. There are other elements that are challenges that we must look at that actually indicate a big growth in the way that we engage with supporters, with fundraisers, and with everything else in this space. So there is an increasing level of competition. I know competition is sometimes seen as something of a dirty word in charities. We're not. From a service provision perspective, we're never in competition with people who work in the same space as us. We always aim to work in partnership and supplement. But ultimately, the reality is, if you want somebody to sign up for your half marathon, and 2 years ago there was 15 people running half marathons, and now there's 150 people running half marathons, we have to be honest with ourselves and recognize that as competition. Part of that is because digital product technology has democratized significantly. That is a symptom of COVID. People had to do things remotely. We are using a global webinar product right now, Zoom, which people had barely heard of in 2019. And we can see how dramatic the rise in things like technology and accessibility has come on. And that's true of the charity sector as well. That's also allowed a decentralization of supporters. And really, on the most very basic fundraising point possible, if you go into your town square with a bib on and a bucket, and you will expect to ask people for cash, and we have a scenario where less people are walking through town squares, you're going to make less money. And that has been mapped across lots of areas of the sector, particularly with regard to events. Face-to-face has struggled with decentralization and lower footfall as well. And that's a challenge as well. It is an opportunity as well, because it means you can look at more virtual events, you can reach more people that way, but it's something we must understand in this broad spectrum. Part of what we want to get out of our fundraising activity is longer term relationships, is ownership of relationships with supporters. So that's moving into first party environments where we don't just engage with somebody once, we understand how we can engage with them in ways they want to engage with us over a long period of time. That means we need to be able to provide a good brand experience. That's something that some charities struggle with. I know I'm on the board of a very small charity that doesn't necessarily have a brand that people would recognize walking down the street, and that's a challenge in that fundraising experience. Similarly, very large organizations benefit hugely from their brands, which is something to consider for your individual circumstances and how you tackle these challenges. Consider where your brand sits, where recognition sits, and we're going to touch upon that a little bit later in this session. There's also elements of decline in areas that we've relied on a lot. So Facebook is tanking hard at the moment. Across the board, we're seeing decline in revenue coming in, we're seeing decline in usage. And on a macro level, the demographics that are using platforms like Facebook on a day-to-day basis is narrowing quite sharply. There is a decline in trust via those areas as well, which means that the kind of fallback of birthday fundraisers or challenges and things like that is not necessarily part of the 3 to 5 year strategy that charities are going to have to undergo. And what that does mean is taking on more responsibility to own products and own relationships, and ultimately win that battle for word of mouth. Make sure that people understand who you are, why your ask is compelling, why the work you do is powerful, and understand that from you. Understand that as you as an organization, not necessarily as some other loose connection. In terms of what we're going to start with in this process, we've recognized this challenge. Now we need to get our own house in order. We need to set the foundations within our organizations to make sure that when we start doing work, it's going to work, it's going to be positive, and it's going to be based on the right foundations. So there's 4 key cornerstones of best practice when you're looking at setting up an organization. You're ensuring that your people are the best resource, fundraisers are the best resource you're going to have. They have the most nuance, the most understanding of your cause, and the most understanding of your audience. You want to make sure that they're empowered to translate that understanding into action. You also want to understand what resources you own. You would be surprised the amount of organizations that have resources that their day-to-day staff aren't aware of, and they're underusing, they're under fundraising because of that. You want to look at stakeholder buy-in as a key cornerstone in this activity. The type of work that we're doing needs top-down support. It needs people to really champion it because it is difficult work, and that's something that will benefit you hugely. And also understanding limitations. That's one of the things that I think the charity space sometimes misses out on, that realistic understanding of where we are not going to go in. There are absolutely times when charities have gone beyond their limitations, but a fundraiser here, I guarantee most of the people on this call will have at one point in their life sat in a room with a trustee or someone like that who has said to them, could we not just do another ice bucket challenge? And you've had to stifle your laughs. Understanding where your realistic limitations are is absolutely vital for focus and good fundraising. And this has to be focused fundraising because we are, fighting from the trenches, as it were. In terms of empowering your teams, there is a history of digital fundraising where the first person in the door defined the team. So if you, first of all, set up digital fundraising within your organization for a web developer, then your digital fundraising team would evolve as a product team building websites and software. If you first got in somebody to do Google ads, then you probably saw your digital fundraising team evolve as an advertising and media buying team. Similarly, if it's come from the database team, then it's been attribution and insight, or if it's come from an editorial team, then it's been content and user journeys. All of these are identifiable disciplines and they are all vital for fundraising. One of the most important things when you're getting your house in order is ensuring that your fundraisers are either leading on or involved in the decision-making in each of these areas. And that's absolutely vital. If your fundraisers are not there to say, actually, from a fundraising perspective, this work stream has to work in this way, then what you're going to get is a piece of work or a product or a piece of activity that doesn't understand the nuance of fundraising. I've been there myself in many different ways. I've spoken to a digital team in the past who said the goal of of people who visit our website is to make a donation. And they said, you couldn't be more wrong. The people who are visiting our website throughout, like down times, yeah, sure enough, it's high intent, it's people who know about us. But at Christmas, when I'm running a huge Facebook campaign, they're not visiting our website because they've predefined with an idea to give a donation. They're visiting the website because I've sent them an ad or a video that's triggered something emotional, that's kind of compelled them to click. But they haven't compelled to click specifically with the intention of giving a donation. We still have to do that work. And the fact that they will be leaving the website in higher rates than people at other times of year is proof of that. And without a fundraiser to be there to make representations for how supporters behave, you're going to have bad product that isn't designed with raising money and converting supporters and building relationships in mind. So empowering your teams, making sure your organization, making sure the people within your fundraising teams are able to have influence, involvement, and hopefully lead on the development of platforms, on decisions about advertising, on the ideas behind tracking and attribution, and the content and the stories that you tell to supporters is absolutely vital. And that's super important. And that's one thing that everybody should be doing, regardless of fundraising in a challenging time. It should be something that people do all the time when it comes to digital. In terms of resources, I mentioned that I think a lot of people are somewhat under-resourced or don't know the resources they have available to them, or sometimes they don't know when work is being duplicated. An exercise I like to do with a fundraising team is to basically get a big boardroom table and post-it notes and say, write down everything we have, write down every software platform we have, write down every agency we're currently paying, write down every third-party account we have on random fundraising websites, understand what content we have at our disposal right now, understand who's on our board, who volunteers for us, what corporate partners can offer to us. By understanding everything you have at your disposal, you've got two things. You've got efficiency boosting, and this is a big thing for fundraising in difficult times, is how do you boost efficiency? How do you spend less money so you can redirect it into ways that you know are going to be profitable or more valuable? So you can turn around and say, okay, well, we've got two products that are the same, we're paying for the both of them, we can cancel one of them. Very, very easy. I've done this with things like VWO and Optimizely, which do broadly the same thing, albeit at different levels. And I've sat there and said, did this organization know that they have both in place? No, they didn't. Now they do. Now they can get rid of the expensive one and save money and spend that somewhere that's going to make them more money. Also understanding, things like your board and corporate partners is super vital, because it really does get you into a position of saying, what resources, what favors can we ask? What value can we have? What teams can I work with to get the most out of this activity? And having visibility is the starting point for efficiency. And this is an exercise I would do once a year, even for every organization, just making sure you take stock of everything that's available, optimizing the things that you think are duplicated work or are not efficient, and also then looking at opportunities to grow, which is super important. And that's going to really empower and really grow this type of fundraising activity. And this is something I think is really important next. It's getting buy-in from stakeholders. And I don't just mean your director of fundraising. I don't just mean your board of trustees. I mean everybody who's potentially a stakeholder, whose work you could cross over with, the other teams within the fundraising division, even people in service delivery or campaigning, if that's something that your organization does. And the biggest piece of advice I can give, if you are doing a piece of work that is going to be difficult, give it a brand name. Give it a project name that people can identify and emotionally connect with. Because there's one thing about saying, this fundraiser is going off doing this piece of work, fine, cool. But if you say this fundraiser is involved in Project Optimize or something like this, then it allows people to basically buy into this thing emotionally, to understand that you are undertaking a challenge, and also to remember. So I mentioned on the last slide, corporate partnerships. If you have a corporate partnership manager that goes off to meet a major corporate partner and isn't thinking about you, and an opportunity for your work arises in that meeting and they aren't thinking about you, then they probably won't mention it. If they have remembered your brand, the brand for this optimization work, the brand for this efficiency work, they're much more likely to spot an opportunity. And that's one thing about efficient working, is making sure that these opportunities are spotted as quickly as possible. And having a naming convention is something that's absolutely vital. I don't know if there's anybody on the call that I worked with kind of 5 to 7 years ago. It was a time when, you know, kind of Donald Trump was still considered funny rather than super toxic. And I think we called our email optimization process Project Mega, for Make Email Great Again. And you had an entire organization running around referring to Project Mega all the time and really bought into it, and really talking about it all the time, and really buying in, coming to our meetings, coming to our lunch and learns, offering advice and content, offering support all the time. When realistically what we were doing was optimizing an email service provider. It was not glamorous, but by giving it a brand that people could identify with, laugh about, and touch and feel, that gave us this opportunity to really boost this from being a boring optimization project into being something that united a fundraising division. And that was something that was absolutely fantastic. I've illustrated this stakeholder buy-in, this brand element, with a picture of a basketball player called Joel Embiid. I don't know if anybody is particularly into basketball here. I'm not. I just happen to know this story because I like branding. Joel Embiid plays with a team called the Philadelphia 76ers. Their coach introduced something called the process. And what this was a plan to lose for 2 years. It was a very hard thing to do. They decided to manage some decline within their team so that they could get the best picks in the draft and get the best young players. And ultimately, if they had 2 years of pain and constant losing, they would build a team that was big enough to challenge. And they called this the process. Now, if they hadn't have given it this brand, then their fans probably would have called for the coach to be sacked pretty quickly. But the fact is, the fans identified with the brand and they were shouting at each other constantly saying, trust the process, trust the process. And it revolutionized the way that this tactic worked, to the point that they got this wonderful Cameroonian basketball player, Joel Embiid, and he revolutionized their team. And their fans were really, really bought into this idea of the process. And what you're doing there is very similar to fundraising, particularly the difficulties of fundraising in a challenging environment. What we're doing is fundraising where we have to pull band-aids off, where we have to tell people that some of their work is threatened by our project. And what we need to do is create an identity that allows us to do that, that allows us allows our stakeholders to feel included, to feel that they can identify what work we're doing. And ultimately, it will give us more time to pull those band-aids off and then deliver excellent work and raise loads of funds. And then people will be like, okay, yeah, I'm glad we waited for this. I'm glad we bought into this project. And they'll feel that their buy-in has contributed to as well. That will allow you to manage your stakeholders way better. It will also allow you to be more personalized in how you manage your stakeholders. You want to be more personalized in how you talk to supporters. You want to give them a better message. You also want to give your colleagues a better message to understand how your work can benefit them, but also to reassure those who might feel threatened by your work that no, it's not going to be super damaging. You're considered, you're part of this event. We're going to get you over the line and get you working better and get you raising more money. And that's something that's huge. Branding works everywhere. I also want to define limitations. And this is really simple. This is understanding that we will not have the Ice Bucket Challenge. This is understanding that we will not have a major mass participation event. If we get one, great, cool, let's watch the money roll in. But you can't fundraise with a no limits attitude to what you can achieve. And that works in two ways. That's setting boundaries for your own work. So that's ensuring that you and your team are considering what's realistic and what isn't as you go along. So there's kind of an always on boundary setting exercise going, but it's also setting boundaries for your stakeholders. It's making sure that you have a terms of reference so that if on a whim, your director comes in and says, I saw something in Waterloo Station this morning that was a great idea and we should do that, then you can point at the wall and say, do you remember when we set this project up and we said this was a boundary we weren't going to cross? And that's a vital resource. for making sure that you don't have a scenario where your team is distracted, is pushed into other projects, or is ultimately diluted in some way, shape, or form from the focus, which is basically raise more money, spend less money, get longer term relationships with supporters. That's what our aim of the game is here today. Now, in terms of what's happening, one of the most important things you can do is find out what's going on with your supporters right now. And I think this is something that is probably under-resourced as well or under-considered. But is your data accurate? Is your understanding of how supporters reach you right now accurate? Because you can't start fundraising, you can't start involving new products unless you've got your house in order and understood what's going on first. So I'm going to jump into an exercise that I do with a lot of organizations. And this is a real stripped back version of an exercise. But normally I get a big wall, I cut it into 4 quadrants, one for discovering your charity in the first place. So that's how do people find out about our name? I make a decide quadrant, which is how do they decide giving to us is a good idea. I have a delivery quadrant, which is how do they get from that position to a position to give. And then a do quadrant, which is the physical mechanism of them giving and how optimized and how functional that is. There are a couple of post-it notes that we've put on. You could probably do this with your own organization and have 1,000 different permutations of how people find you. It can be really, really complex, but just for illustrative purposes, I can pick a post-it note from each quadrant here, and I can write a user story. So this is a story in the here and now of how potentially a member of the public finds out about my charity and makes a donation. So I've got, in the first quadrant, somebody has walked past a high street shop. They've walked down the street, they've seen my charity's shop, they've learnt my name solely by walking past the retail outlet. Cool, they now know my name. Later, they pick up a newspaper and they read an article that's come from a press release that my media team has come out. And that article really makes a compelling case for giving to me. And that's fantastic. So that's now the decision has been made. They're now in the realm of saying, okay, I know why giving to that organization, I know who they are because I saw the shop. I know why giving to them is a good idea because I read this article. Then they've seen a Facebook ad. So, they've kind of seen this ad, it's got a video, and they've said, oh, I remember that organization because I saw their shop. And then I read the article and they did seem good. And this ad is giving me an opportunity to click here to donate now. So that's really, really cool. And then that has brought me to the do area, which is a donation page, which is what I do for a living with iRaiser. Of course, I make good donation pages, but that's 4 different areas. You have your retail team who manages high street shops. You have your media team that briefs newspapers. You have your advertising team that does your Facebook ads or your social media team or whoever that may be. And then you have your web team that builds your donation pages. That's 4 potential internal stakeholders that manage one single journey to donation. And aside from this exercise being good for telling you where you're missing, so you might turn around and do this exercise and say that you don't have a good donation page. You might say that you're missing out on certain areas of people making decisions. But what this exercise also does is lets all of your team recognize where they should be working with others. And I like to use the example of a media team particularly because I would say, having had experience of working with a number of charities over the years, there's often a disconnect between the type of organic media and the type of paid media that goes out. And that link between deciding and delivering is often a big issue. So you have a newspaper article doesn't necessarily tell somebody how to make a donation because it's not an ad, it's an article. It's a journalist talking, quoting your charity and telling them about the work they do, but it's not an ad to make a donation. That Facebook ad that goes out that gets that person's attention to get to make a donation has to understand when volume and intent is going to be higher and has to understand when the media team are likely to start briefing stories, when you're likely to have your CEO interviewed by Victoria Derbyshire, when you're likely to be featured in a newspaper, I've been in a situation personally myself where I was told very urgently, Jeremy Kyle is doing a TV show about us tonight. And I had to sit there and say in a positive light or a negative light. But, I had to react as a media buyer to do that. And knowing about those things means you can advertise better, you can fundraise better, you can get your ask out to more people. And this type of exercise, as well as giving you visuals of how your audience find you, which you might not have had before, it also lets you know how you can work better as an internal unit to make sure that the teams who influence each other's activity are connected better, are inclusive by design, and are ensuring that, that they're signposting in the right way. And that's something that's absolutely vital. And you can really have fun with this. You can create all sorts of different ways that people have found you. And one of the things that this will probably do is move you away from being overly prescriptive with things like personas. You might decide that personas are useful as a very early guiding point, but then you do an exercise like this and you say, actually, there's 17,000 different permutations that somebody can find our website and give us money. And that's something to consider as well, how much that nuance moves away from the more traditional direct mail type style of media planning, as it were. In terms of attribution, once people give you donations, you need a way to assign those donations to various activities and buckets. On a really simple level, if I undertake an activity, is it worth doing? Is it valuable? Is it producing donations? Should I do it again? Should I do it more often? And that's where attribution comes in. Now, attribution is not perfect. You will always have an attribution method that misses some nuance in one of your activities. Your job is to pick an attribution method that best suits the best version of the truth for your organization. It's not a case of saying everything must be absolutely perfect in every way, shape, or form. It's saying what gives our team the best tools to make the best decision. Might not be perfect, but it's the way that allows us to have the most impact in being efficient fundraisers and raising more money. Once you've chosen that attribution model, your job is to enforce it rigidly. As soon as it slips, as soon as somebody says, oh yeah, I know that person, I know they clicked on an email, but actually we also send them a direct mail as well. So, could we include them in the direct mail attribution because that makes our ROI look a bit better? No, enforce. The method of attribution has to be completely rigid, or else it all falls down, it creates inconsistent data, and it leads to you making bad decisions. Attribution needs to be identifiable, it needs to be functional, and it needs to be enforced with an iron fist. It's so important. In terms of the KPIs you're looking at, you want to be able to limit those as much as possible. I mean, I've sat in rooms where somebody has played kitchen sink with KPI documents where I've been looking at 50, 60, 70 KPIs for a campaign, most of which are useless. So I want to know how much money I make. I want to know how many people have made payments. And I want to know which ones are single gifts and which ones are regular gifts. That's 4 KPIs that I can run a functioning campaign off. I don't need to know bounce rate in many cases. I don't need to know dwell time. I don't need to know how many people scroll below the fold in normal cases. Just not valuable. So make sure that you're limiting KPIs to being very meaningful. And subsequently, that means having a way to communicate with senior leaderships in such a way that they can make good decisions and understand them, which means sometimes limiting the information you spread, but doing that because it's functional to your cause. You want to be able, as a fundraising expert, you want to be able to say, look, this is good, this is bad, this means do this more, this means do this less. You don't want to confuse that with data that can be misinterpreted and lead to bad decisions at a high level and scuppering your plans. One of the most important things about attribution is also talking about when things fail. It's very important. Nobody's gonna suffer if they point out that they've done something that hasn't been successful. If we've invested quite a lot of money in Twitter and we haven't got any money back from Twitter because their advertising platform is terrible, then we should say that so we can stop people from doing it in the future. That's really, really simple. It's something that, it's not just a charity problem, it's an everywhere problem, that people are very worried and nervous about pointing out that things haven't gone well. It's very important to do that. Organizations build assets based off failure as well as success. Celebrate that failure. I used to do a weekly meeting in an old job called Specialists in Failure, where I would basically give rewards to people who would come in and say, look, I tried this week and it didn't work, and this is what it's taught me, because that's a really valuable asset. Keeping that quiet is bad for an organization. We're going to talk about marketing very quickly now as well. And like I said, I'm not going to give you loads of screenshots of campaigns that have worked in the past. This is not an in the past exercise. It's also not a copy your neighbor exercise. Every organization is different. Everybody is nuanced. Their audiences engage with their charity for very specific reasons. They have different connections to that charities. The way that they find out about them, the existing infrastructure is all different. There is no silver bullet for getting marketing right, but there is principles you can follow to get your line of thinking correct that can help you make better decisions and quicker decisions about what you're doing next. First and foremost, I would say content is incredibly important in marketing. So you want to be able to create content that lots of people will see. One of the biggest challenges for that is, how do you get that content made? And that's something that I think I've certainly experienced when, I've come into an organization, my first day in work, and I've said, right, I need to do some Facebook ads. How do I go about doing that? And it's been quite difficult to find that out. And that's something that one of the ways to boost efficiency is to make sure that those questions are easily answered and you can go out and capture opportunities very quickly. In digital fundraising, one of the things some people will have experienced and some people will experience in the future is the ability to react very quickly. So if another team has underspend, which they will, every team should have underspend. If you have an events team in your organization, because they're doing events, they always need to have contingency money in case they go over budget, which means at the end of the quarter, that contingency money is either going back in the bank or it's being reallocated to another team. As a digital fundraiser, that should be you asking for that money. You should be the one that says, do you know what, this is opportunity, this is underspend that we can reinvest right now. The board have already signed off on a spend. Let's get this into somewhere digital and get it working for us and getting more supporters, more eyeballs and everything like this. So having that means being reactive. It means if that underspend comes on your doorstep today, can you get a campaign live by Tuesday next week? That's really, really important. So understanding how to brief in content in your organization is vital. Do you have an internal comms team that does this? Do you have an agency that builds stuff for you? Do you have a volunteer? Get that written down and establish a process that you can hand to everybody in the organization that says, if you get asked to make a Facebook ad or to make a YouTube ad or to do something like this is the steps you must follow, and make that clear. I would also have, as part of any campaign, 3 key creative routes. So we've talked about case studies, services, and cause related. Here, as an example, I think that gives you a broad range. And the reason you want different creative routes is because your audience will be diverse and varied, and some will respond to one thing, others will respond to another. And, you could say on a very simple level, your older demographics might respond to more individual campaigns, more case studies focused on individual service users, whereas your younger people might respond better to you talking about the injustice of your issue and banging on the door of Downing Street or something like that. And being able to have all 3 creative routes in place at the start so that you can quickly pivot from one to the other when things are working is super important from a content perspective. And the only bit of kind of silver bullet advice I would say for this is make sure you create ads to be platform specific, because it's the easiest way to lose impressions and to lose reach. It's just to have some level of image that's not the right dimensions or not the right resolutions that harms its quality score unnecessarily. Your quality score on advertising platforms should be based on the relevance of your content, the compellingness of the message for people to engage with it, and ultimately the reputation you have on that platform. If you have satisfied all of those, but your ratio of image is slightly wrong and you get downgraded because of that, then that's such an unforced error. And that's something that's really important. And what sometimes happens, is you might have a situation where you get extra budget and you say, well, we'll just dump those ads in, the Instagram ad, that'll work on Twitter, that'll be fine. That's a mistake, and that's going to harm you in the long term. By making sure that your processes include all the areas you plan on working with, that's going to solve a lot of problems and make sure that you're functioning a lot better. In terms of marketing, there are a number of different ways to market. The idea being is that as a marketer, you should max out all of those to the best of your ability. So there are a number of different phases in terms of what you're doing. So you've got awareness phases where you're not asking for money, you're just getting your name out there, like we said earlier with the discovery phase. You then want to look at how you blanket your name with things like low value traffic like Google Display. It's rubbish, it's grimy, but it gets your name out there. You can then do value confirmation through things like premium display and social media. And then you can look at converting audiences via paid search. So this is all about a linear path to make somebody's online journey and relationship with your brand work in the best possible way. The only thing I would underline here as a key takeaway is paid search needs to be split into 3 different areas for reporting. You need your brand paid search, so that's your name as an organization. You need generic paid search, which is search terms that are not your name, and you need product specific. So if you're doing the London Marathon or a firewalk or a pub, sitting in a bathtub of baked beans, those type of products need their own section as well. The reason being, brand search will perform better than everything else. If you include all those other work streams in the report for brand, they will get buried and you won't be able to optimize them. So keep them separate means you can work well with them and you can get real value out of paid search beyond just paying Google for the sake of paying Google. And there is a lot of value to be had there. I'm conscious that I'm running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to whiz through this next one. In terms of managing risk, when you're looking to grow, the one piece of advice I would do is assign a budget based on what risk you're doing. So based on what you know, so how much return on investment you get from each channel, you will have low risk, medium risk, and high risk. So you would put 50% of your budget into low risk channels, 40% into medium risk, and always keep 10% of budget to go crazy, to do wild stuff, to try new things, to throw stuff up in the air and hope it takes. That way, particularly with fundraising in difficult times, you're looking to make sure that you're as profitable as possible, that you're fighting against the tide of poor conditions as much as possible. You can have a lot of positive revenue coming in from those safe, low risk areas, but you also have that area to be in it to win it on the next new thing. I mean, the charities that got in on Twitch before everybody else made massive amounts of money, and then everybody else has struggled to jump into the gaming sector afterwards. And it has really been a first in makes that has the benefit. And then when the kind of the tide has rolled afterwards, you've then had a problem. So having that 10% for high risk in every budget you do will allow you to be much more flexible in terms of growing and finding those new nuggets of success. It also means have a kill switch criteria. So if something's not going well, be prepared to turn it off. There's no, you don't want to chase unicorns. If something's not working, kill it. It's really, really straightforward. There's no need to be too worried about having something be successful. And that draws back to the idea of celebrating failures as well as successes. You find out something's not working, best thing you can do is go tell everybody that's not working and stop doing it. The last thing I want to do, and this is something that is really important from a process perspective, is what are we asking people to do? So I have used in the past terms like digital tin shaking, where your ask is give us money because give us money. And there's been nothing else that's really gone on with it. We've lost the ability to take people through a really good digital journey through good product. And one of the biggest challenges with product is that I think for a long time it was seen as an enormous investment, both in terms of time and money. And that's not always the case. And I think what we can do is both understand how we can do cheaper, more efficient products, but also how we can prioritize those products in the best way possible. So our vision is to have audiences, we always want to speak to our audience as the right person in the right place at the right time, but we also want to put in the right ask, the thing that will compel them to give, the thing that they're interested in. And people online are very open about telling you what they're interested in and what they're looking to do at any given time. So we can be very responsive to putting that right product in front of them. It's very, the same person at one point in their day will be very primed to giving an individual gift. At a different point in their day, they might want a retail type offering because they're looking to purchase something. At a different point in their day, they might be in a good mood and they might want to get involved in an event. All of these things exist in different places, and having a good suite of products that you can raise on a low risk basis will mean that you can get to those right people at the right time. I would start by having a dream session. So everybody in a room, post-its, nothing is a bad idea. Get everything out there, harvest the potential for inspiration from your team. Your team know your audience, so they're likely to be working with a really good instinct for this type of exercise anyway. So that's kind of a really good focus for garnering ideas. It also means you can group ideas. So if you have a couple of people that all have the same type of passion, you can put that together and have them work together on a project. And one of the key byproducts of an idea session is you can identify people's passions, people's skills, and value from that. So on a really simple level, who hasn't run a cycling event previously? If you've done Ride London, you've been putting up the creative for Ride London, you've looked around the office and you go, right, who turns up at 9 in the morning in Lycra? I'll pull them into this room because they're likely to be my target audience and I can pick their brains for whether this is good or bad. This is just this on steroids, as it were. This is getting everybody to have their specific passions and understanding where those opportunities are, and getting your audience, or getting your team rather, to maximize their skills, so that when you do choose to launch products, you can put the most efficient people and the most knowledgeable people on those products, which is going to be super, super valuable. To decide which products you work on, once this session is done, you can do a really simple exercise that will allow you to prioritize really well and make sure that you're guaranteeing the best form of income and return as well. So I would put a graph like this. So this is a business need and user need graph. You can copy this, screenshot this, it'll be in the pack. It's a really straightforward thing. There's no value in going through 6 years worth of project management training in these type of exercises. This is the super simple way of identifying if a product is going to work. Business need is the need that your charity, your organization needs from a product. So you can see on this platform, I've put down a gift aid form and I've scored that 5 from a business need perspective. That's the highest rating we have here. The gift aid form is super important because we as a business know that we don't have enough people signed up to gift aid. We have people that we believe are individual donors that could sign up to gift aid. We need to increase our revenue by doing this. The user need for this is quite small because there isn't that many members of the public that are demanding a gift aid form because they just don't know about it. And that's something that's really important. When we look at user need, this is something that somebody wants from you, not that something you think they want from you or something they don't know they want, but you want to second guess them and say, look, I know what's good for you. You need this type of product. This is something that right now, if you stopped one of your supporters on the street and said, what do you want from your charity? Something they would say without any prompt from yourself. That's user need. So similarly, I've put down music event right here. That's a user need as well. Users, if you say, what do you want from your favorite charity? Oh, I'd love if they put on a concert. That type of stuff happens all the time. It's got a very low business need score because it's not profitable for you. And that's something that, that's worth considering as well. Just because a user wants something doesn't mean it's going to be valuable. So having both business need and user need should create this diagonal line in the middle, which is combined priority. So I've put there something like a marathon stewardship journey. We know people want to do the marathon. We know they want to be stewarded throughout that process and told where to go, what to turn up, what time to do, how to get their t-shirt. All of these things are very identifiable, very common logic user needs. We also know that from a business, one of the biggest business needs from an event like the marathon is making sure people fundraise and turn up on time. So stewardship satisfies both of those. That's why it's got a business need score of 5, a user need score of 5, and that's why it's right on the top of that combined priority list. And that's something that's absolutely vital, is to create priorities that both satisfy both the business needs and the user need. And when you talk about what type of work you're going to do, you simply apply quadrants like this. So you can say, right, everything in green is priority 1. Everything in blue is the second priority. So if we get green done, we can then move on to blue. If we get priority 3 done, we can move on to that. Happy days. Fantastic. We now can say that the things that will make us most money because they satisfy business needs and have the most likelihood of uptake because they satisfy user needs will be done first. So you have big audience, big profit. It's going to be the best form of fundraising. What you're doing now is having a product priority that manages risk and guarantees more profitable stuff comes first and works in the right way. There's a couple of things I want to, this is economics, this is demand and supply. It's very, very straightforward. There's a couple of things I want to touch upon here, particularly with regard to value exchange products. Value exchange is something you will hear all the time, but you will hear it misinterpreted all the time. Value exchange products should sit along that combined priority line. The value that's being exchanged, so I am giving my supporter something in return for a donation, that should be relatively even. The value a user gets from this should be similar to the value the business gets from this. If they don't, then you're doing a value proposition product that's out of line. So if the user need for a value exchange product is higher than the business need, that means you're giving the user more than you're getting in return, which means it's not profitable. If you're doing it the other way around, where the business need is higher and the user need is lower, it means you're asking for too much money and the exchange you're giving is not compelling enough for that user to engage in that product. So if you're looking at doing something on a value exchange, which is really good for, fundraising in the trenches, when we're faced with challenge, if individual giving isn't being supported well enough, then we can pivot to saying, well, let's incentivize people to donate. That incentivization needs to fit that combined priority. It needs to balance out. Otherwise, you're either going to not make enough money from it or you're going to be asking too much of your users, and neither of those will work. And that's something that's really important from this exercise. You lay all your post-its down from your ideas session, you figure out where they sit, and you figure out what you're going to work on from that. And what you will then have is a suite of products that are much more sustainable, much more scalable, and ultimately efficient, because they will make you more money, you will spend less money doing them, and they will build a better relationship with the audience. Lastly, make it happen. If I can say anything about this type of exercises, please don't wait. The cost of living crisis is happening now. It's not pausing for anybody. The Bank of England base rate just got increased to 5% today. So people's mortgages are under more strain, and we as charity fundraisers are going to bear the brunt of that. So get working straight away. The quicker you're up on something, the faster you're going to be benefiting from it. Project manage these activities, take responsibility, brand them, make sure you're enforcing the rules. Wins and losses are huge. Make sure both of those are shouted from the rooftops. And most importantly is if you get a good level of efficient fundraising working, watch that money roll in. That's something that's super important. If you are not clicking multiple times a day on something that tells you how much money you're making, then you're not going to be as sharp as possible. You should always have a dashboard, a login, a platform, somewhere where you can go in and press F5 and say, right, at 11 o'clock in the morning, we've made this much. I'll go off and have a tea break. I'll come back at 11:45, because, 45-minute tea breaks. I work for a French company. They're super chilled at that. It's fantastic. But I'll come back at 11:45 and I'll see how much more money we've made. Being plugged into how much money you are bringing in is vital as a fundraiser. And that's not necessarily a guarantee. Sometimes people will have problems with the amount of time it takes to get data into their CRM. So they might not be able to be very reactive from a CRM perspective. If you're not, go find somewhere else of tracking how much money that's coming in. There will be somewhere else to log into, find it and watch that money. They always say follow the money when you're investigating something. If you're trying to raise more money, seeing how much is coming in is giving you that instinct. It's sharpening your tools and it's making you a better fundraiser. And that's the thing I would leave everybody with today. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate the audience being fantastic. You can get me directly, obviously, of course, but in terms of socials, my name is spelled in a relatively unique way, so you're not going to confuse me with anybody else on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything else. So I am everywhere.
Great. Thank you so much, Owen. I found that really interesting. And also just wanted to say thank you to everyone who shared their top tips in the chat. I'll be sure to check those out after the webinar. And now we've had a few questions in the Q&A section already, so we can dive straight in. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to add them in now. So the first question that we had is from Alex, saying, I'm at a small charity with a very small advertising budget. Is there something like a golden ratio of advertising spend for return? This may be an impossible question to answer, but what would you suggest should be the minimum spend on advertising?
I mean, it's an interesting question. The golden ratio is 10% more than you currently have. Is the reality of that. The challenge there is optimizing rather than chasing a unicorn, as it were. So it's understanding where, taking this exercise where you're saying, right, this is what we currently have. Are we making sure that this is attributed properly? Are we making sure that it's segmented properly? Once we have that done, what things can we do to improve? I mean, there is a thing I would take from the private sector in terms of the advertising side of things. It's the goal of a media buyer is to spend more on media. It's not to take on the overall profit and loss concerns of an organization. It's not to understand how much things cost. It's not to understand budgets. It's to be tunnel visioned to spend more. And the only way you justify spending more is by increasing the ROI incrementally. So as a fundraiser, your challenge is to make sure that you're optimizing that work and then adding extra budget on, justifying it. I mean, it all has to be justified. You've got to go senior and say, look, can I spend another £300? Can I spend another £1,000? What I would say is with small organizations, there has been a trepidation in terms of launching fundraising because there is an assumption that ads are expensive. And yeah, DRTV is expensive. I mean, it's a ripoff, but you can launch an ad on Meta for maybe a couple of £100 will get you a learning phase. You then might have, say for example, you get a learning phase in £300, you got another £700 to run. That's going to run at profit. If that runs at a profit of 1.2% ROI, you've broken even and you've got a whole bunch of new supporters that you never had before. All of those supporters go into a journey that you can email them about stuff and get them converted to regular giving, and it works. And those are all justifiable ways of fundraising with tiny budgets. And then the more you do, the more you can ask for more money to scale in the future. And I would always say that there's no organization that can never, even call on one corporate partner or one trustee to say, look, we want a special project done. Even if you have zero budget, there might be a trustee that's willing to take a punt on this type of activity.
Yeah, thank you. And with regards to ads, actually, Alexia posted in the chat very kindly a comment saying that charities get free Google ads up to £10,000 per month by Google ad grants. So that would definitely help with budgeting.
Yeah, if you don't have that, get it. Although, slight caveat, they're a little bit cautious about the way you use those ads for fundraising. Lots of people do get away with doing it, but technically under the terms of service, they want you to use those ads for things like service provision and stuff like that. However, the reality is, if the activity you needed to do for service provision is covered by Google, that should be more money in the organization for fundraising. So it's,
Great, thank you. The next question we had is from an anonymous attendee saying, I'm looking for advice to pass on to our fundraising volunteers who often have very little time. What would you say is the most important thing they focus on? If they were to action one piece of your advice, what would it be?
I would say with fundraising volunteers, it's understanding where their skills lie. And I'd extend that to all volunteers. I mean, the payoff in volunteering is very important because somebody's donating quite a lot. They're donating their time. They need to see some level of value or see some level of exchange for that. We've all been in situations where we've had volunteers that we don't know anything to do with. So, I've been in situations where I've had a volunteer that's come from a corporate partner and I've had them sitting for 3 hours every Wednesday on SEMrush searching keywords, which I already knew, just to kind of make it look like they were doing stuff. One of the things I would say is, as part of, when I said the ideas section allows you to understand where people's passions are, and also the early phase section of this where you're understanding what resources you have. Volunteers are a resource, but understanding where their skill sets and their passions lie means that you can have them focus on things that are of value. So, I'm working with a volunteer organization at the moment, and I've got one person who's incredibly good at web development. There's absolutely no chance I need them to be going and doing videos of cycling for Ride London. I need them to go build websites. And it's maximizing individual resource to get the most out of them. There is some cases where, there is more broader volunteers. What I would say with broader volunteer bases, one of the things I've seen most valuably is letter writing, saying thank you to donors. And that's something that normally, if you're on a salary, it gets bumped to the bottom because it's quite time consuming, but the payoff is amazing. If somebody gets a handwritten letter thanking them for the donation, then it's super powerful. And that would be something that I would say that you can satisfy both the need for the organization, but also you can make volunteers happy. Volunteers will like to do that.
Definitely, thank you. Yeah, I think we've also researched quite a bit that the personal element definitely helps with retention of, both from like volunteers to also sponsorship. Just adding that personal touch can be very powerful. And we've had another quite situational question saying, any tips regarding cross teamwork and collaboration for a very small fundraising team, medium marketing team, and large programs department? The fundraisers are trying to optimize the work and centralize information to support clearer reporting, but there's no buy-in from other areas of the organization, and we are losing opportunities on digital fundraising.
It's an interesting question. I was at a talk a while back, which I'll steal from them. It was somebody who had been leading at Battersea Dogs Home and went through the process of when they first started asking for money. And I think something that was quite industry wide was that fundraising teams were being under-resourced because fundraising was being seen as something of a dirty word. Proving that it's not will boost those resources and will have people start paying attention to you. One of the things I've seen, I haven't done directly myself, but I've seen somebody produce a report on it, was talking to donors on the basis of a survey and asking donors how they quantified their support. And the output, so, the ways you engage with charity is time, money, voice. And people often say that we value our volunteers and we value our campaigners much more. But if you ask supporters what value they assign, it's the people that put their money where their mouth is that feel most engaged. So I feel more engaged with the organization I give 25 quid a month to than the one I sign a petition for. Like, and that's because it's my money. I have to go out and earn it. And, you know, it's important on that level. And one of the things I've seen is when we spoke about earlier today about getting buy-in, it's using data to prove that things need to be better resourced. And if you're turning around and saying, well, look, you know, our supporters actually feel that they're the most powerful people in the organization because they're putting their money where their mouth is, we need to be extra resourced. There is a big barrier there. If you have a small fundraising team, you know, I would say the challenge is to get the organization itself at a governance level to start shifting that balance and putting more resource in on a day-to-day level. That exercise I showed you earlier, where you're getting all people in place to understand where dependencies lie, so where the media team might integrate with the social media team, where the retail team might have influence on the comms team, all of that type of work is good to help people recognize that they're valued. And I think, you know, in that type of organization where fundraising is under-resourced, actually going to people and saying, do you know what, you're a fundraiser too, your work is actually helping us raise funds, is important. And, you know, sometimes fundraisers are left behind. Sometimes they're kings of the castle because they run around and say, you know, I eat what I kill. I go out and I make money for this organization, and they get to kind of lord it over people. And you've seen conflict in organizations all the time where people are, fundraisers always have something, you know, that person can put £1 million next to their name, but what about my work? Where's the value for that? Well, as fundraisers, let's go say to that person, do you know what? You've done a fantastic campaign. You've got us in the newspaper 8 times over the last month. We reckon that's made us 60 grand. Would you be proud of making us 60 grand? And that brings people in. So you might not get a structural change immediately because that takes time. But in terms of an operational change, if you can get people starting to work with you on a casual basis, you'll be able to benefit from their resources and boost things that way anyway.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the benefits of data never fail to come up in our webinars. And now I'm afraid that's actually all we have time for today. So thank you once again, Owen and iRaiser, for helping us put on this webinar. And thank you to everyone who attended. As always, I think this was great and a really engaging webinar. If you could share your feedback with us, that would be fantastic. My colleague has pasted a link in the chat, and you'll also receive a prompt just after you leave the Zoom page. And finally, our next webinar is next week on Wednesday, June 28th, about nonprofit journeys towards digital transformation. I hope to see you there. Thank you.